Hello and welcome to the REALink Conversation series organized by the Lutheran Community Care Services, otherwise simply known as LCCS. I'm Augustine Atwan. Today's topic, workplace culture. And joining me on the panel, starting on this end, Deborah, who is a senior counselor at LCCS, Sylvia Chan, who is the CEO of Night Owl Cinematics, a local digital company incubating ideas, creating meaningful content, and curating brand success, and Ivy Tse, who is the CEO of Halogen Foundation, a youth charity that works with the next generation of young people, inspiring and influencing them to lead both themselves and others. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us on the panel.
Yes,
Right.
Thanks for having us.
And I know they have a lot to say on the topic, but before we draw them in, the LCCS team reached out to a group of people here in Singapore and posed two important questions. One, a good workplace culture is one that, and they're supposed to complete that. And the second question is, what irks me at the workplace is? So let's have a listen and hear what they have to say.
A good workplace culture is one that would help you in all ways that they can, and also they deal with you in a very honest manner.
Good workplace culture is one that invites everyone's involvement, everyone's voices from the top to the bottom, and everyone can identify with a workplace culture that revolves around the safety, the welfare, and also the unity of everyone working together.
Okay, a good workplace culture is one that has open channels for people to voice out their opinions and feedback to the people on top. It's one that has a flat hierarchy so that there's no one person or one body that controls all the influence in the organization.
A good workplace culture is one that invites honest and open conversation, as well as where the employee can learn about how to develop themselves.
So to me, a good workplace culture is a workplace that encourages your employees' growth, and the leadership there is not very dictatorship, and your employee prioritizes work-life balance and actually practices it and prioritizes your mental health, mental well-being as well as your physical well-being.
A good workplace culture is definitely one that promotes communication and transparency. Right?
I think a good workplace culture is one that celebrates good mental health and also people caring for each other.
I think a good workplace culture is one whereby we can be ourselves.
A good workplace culture is one where you feel safe. Safe not only just to thrive and do creative things, but also be able to take risks and accept failures.
What irks me at the workplace? Bosses ask you to do things out of your role.
Okay. What irks me at the workplace is basically not being honest with me or not being straightforward with me.
I think what irks me most is the discrepancies of treatment. Sometimes people are treated better, not because they are highly qualified, but because they come from better families. And that irks me because you are not fair to your employees.
What irks me at the workplace is a culture that is toxic, someone who gossips intentionally and attacks people with their words.
What irks me at the workplace are bosses and superiors that demand or expect work on the basis of goodwill or kindness.
That what irks me at the workplace is where there's a top-down hierarchy that emphasizes only on performance and not empathy.
So what irks me about a workplace is when I have a leader that micromanages me, because that means that the leader does not have trust in me, and a leader that often doesn't respect my work-life boundaries.
Right, so there you have it, a range of voices, and I must say, ladies, we are talking about Singapore, right? I mean, I almost felt like this is like some other country. Frankly, I respect all the voices and all the comments that were raised, but I do want to draw you into the discussion. In the first question, the word safety came up a few times.
Yes.
Maybe we'll start with Deborah. As a counselor, is that a concern? I mean, you need to have a safe environment so that you feel you can open up, you can speak up.
Yeah.
I think for sure. I mean, like, and I'm also wondering how the participants or interviews who shared their thoughts, like, what was their definition of safety? I think, like, we're not talking about physical safety. Of course, that is also something that needs to be paid attention to. But I think it's more of like psychological safety. And I think then the question that we have, that I'm thinking about, is that when you talk about good workplace culture, what are the conditions that the culture or the organization is creating to help people to feel safe to open up? And I think one thing that resonated with me a lot at my own workplace organization, I think it's just the idea of being acknowledged, not only for the person who you are, but also like what you're doing, and just really being able to express thoughts and views. So I think that's what came up for me, and I think also resonated with the idea of honesty. So that was what came up for me.
You know why I'm smiling? Because when you mentioned physical space, I mean, some people are quite particular about space. Like, you're coming into my territory. It's like,
boundary.
okay, that's the limit. Yeah, my boundaries, so to speak. But there's so much we can talk about. But, my personal views aside, you want to jump in, ladies?
I think what I hear a lot is conversations, right? And then talk about like honesty, they talk about openness, talk about like voices. So I think that it really, really mirrors what we learned in the pandemic, whereby we start to realize that this is kind of like the digital age whereby people are so informed. So there's a lot of divergent views. You can even say that this is the age of like dissent, where people are unafraid to voice out their opinions, their thoughts. So I think workplace culture, it's challenging in this space because you have to balance all those voices out in one single workplace. And I think that it is what all of us probably are going through. And I think as leaders or managers, right, it is the time for us to actually, without a manual or without any guides on how to do this, is for us to really maneuver and see what we can do best in this space. Yeah.
I want to just spice things up a little bit. Some argue that the COVID-19 situation, and where a lot of people had to work from home, as she said, finally, I can have this space and I don't have to interact with certain people in the office or whatever. But it's not helping because you're actually hiding behind a screen and you're not really addressing concerns. Your thoughts? I mean,
well, it's really interesting you brought that up because when COVID hit and we had our circuit breaker, one very interesting phenomenon that our team actually went through, that when I exchanged notes, no one else shared the same kind of circumstance, where our team was just really dying to be connecting with one another. We've never had the issue of offing cameras whenever we had any Zoom call from day one till now. It was
you must
really
be an
strange.
exceptional organization.
We're very people-driven. So I think the point that in the videos and different people share the different definitions, I really resonate with the whole idea of balance. It's a bit of a dance, right? Because every organization is wired very differently. Like, I think our organization is very unique. Like, everyone finds it quite interesting. Like, that happened. Like, we had to explain to our team why other people might prefer to have camera off, because that was their de facto mode. But I think in the idea of this art of managing cultures or building cultures, I think there is a lot of uniqueness in each organization and its entities, as well as the duality of it. So like in the video, some people mentioned about the psychological safety and a permission, a safe space. Sometimes I find that there could be the environment created for safe space, but then if you don't feel, or your past experiences about speaking up hasn't been very positive, it could be a perception that there is no safe space.
This is, after all, 2022. So a lot of things we never really made an effort to talk about, and we kind of just kept it under the, we're in sort of like parked it somewhere else. But then COVID-19 has sort of actually forced many things to come up. Mental health is one area. Some people are a lot more candid, and they want to actually tell their colleagues or even people that they work with, look, this is what I'm going through. And then you don't have to respond, but just be aware and to understand. So I picked up the word safe environment. I mean, really, I want to feel safe. You're smiling, so you want to punch it?
I think everyone wants to feel safe. Like I mentioned, it's a place with many different opinions. So I think I think one of the biggest things that I've learned throughout this whole, pandemic, and then the age of the Great Resignation, and everything that's going on, right? I think one thing I've learned is actually conflict management. Right, and I think that is the biggest takeaway for me, because I think maybe as an Asian society or a Singaporean society, perhaps we are not so open to voicing out our conflicts so openly. Like we feel like.
Are you saying that in other cultures or in other parts of the world, they can just say things and then
I think in
go
Singapore,
out and have drinks and have food later?
No, but I feel like in Singapore in general, right, we try to handle conflict in a nice way, or tell our colleagues, even if we have a feedback, we try to handle it sensitive.
You gotta be nice. Don't say negative things about other people.
Correct, right? So I think it's the art of giving and receiving feedback that I have truly learned. So for example, for us in NOC, right, we in recent times, right, we have really invested very heavily in a lot of workshops just to solicit feedback and really try to give feedback. I think it is actually a skill. It's not something that comes very naturally. It is such a skill, and it's so challenging to learn how to give and receive feedback actually.
But I'm glad you brought it up. But I think it's not industry specific. I mean, it happens everywhere. I mean, look at what's happening even in the health sector, and there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and then you mentioned the phrase "the Great Resignation." But we also want this discussion program not really to offer solutions. I mean, we've been saying this in the entire series, and this is the final program in our series, where we also want our viewers to understand that you may end up having more questions than answers in the program. But I want to bring you in, Deborah, from your professional perspective working at LCCS. Is it possible to handle conflict management in a nice way?
Yeah. And I think what Sylvia mentioned, I really connected with. I think is the art of kind of like balancing, giving feedback, receiving and giving. And to be very honest, I think it's true that maybe in our culture we avoid like direct confrontation, but conflict is part and parcel of life. Like actually in every relationship, there will bound to be conflict. And I see conflict more as like it provides possibilities rather than it's something that we always need to fix. So I think at LCCS, what we try to do is that we don't avoid conflict, and we're not quick to, I think, to repair or to fix by, like just saying like, let's get this done, or let's talk it out, and then, just kind of like fix it. I think it's the idea of then, like after you are talking through it and trying to fix it, what do you do to further support the whatever that caused that conflict to happen? Is it the safety that people didn't feel? Sometimes there is a misunderstanding about certain things. So I think for us is that we try our best to create processes where we allow people to come together to talk about it and to have a shared understanding of how do we then move forward from this conflict. So it's not so much of like resolving or managing. I think it's really transforming that conflict into something bigger for us.
But actually, it's in response to the videos that we saw earlier. Another phrase that struck me was celebration, to celebrate. Does it mean to agree to disagree, to celebrate different personalities and different talents and different skills that we bring to the table? And another phrase that was mentioned is flat. When I hear all these things, I mean, is that utopia or is that doable in the first place?
I fully resonate with your comments, because I do feel like sometimes we get a little bit stuck in just defining and creating definitions. Sometimes it creates divides. To Deborah's point about conflict, I kind of found that in the context of an organization, actually conflict takes time to escalate. If we're really talking about like really a fight, like something that's really deal breaking, it starts with just something small, maybe in
it always does.
Maneuvering working styles, or you have something that you're not very sure about and you're not comfortable to voice it. And I find that that's an important thing to call out too, because very often we kind of really good at fixing things. So whenever there's conflict, hierarchy, we'll just, being very Singaporean, I think, we'll structure something and then, change organization structure, create this policy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's taking a step back and getting the team to have a conversation, like there's something undergirding that, and it's really about just some very simple, having a good conversation with someone to align how we can get through our goals together. So in that context of celebration and all, I think it's also part of the language of seeing not just conflict or no conflict. There can't be an organization without conflict because we're all different when we come in.
It's part of life.
And yes, and I think that's something that's been really encouraging. I guess we can afford to be a bit more idealistic being a charity with a cause.
But I want to spend just a couple of minutes to talk about the bosses. I personally believe leadership is passé. We should be talking about stewardship. I mean, I know all these schools and universities and their books and all that out there, but they actually brought it up that, you know, in the IRCs, boss came up, right? And a couple of other things. Not being straightforward, toxic gossip environment in the office, micromanaging, top down, no empathy. This was some of the key things that I picked up. Again, your thoughts? Anyone wants to kick it off?
Maybe for me, I'll kick it off because I'm not in a leadership position. So,
but you might be one day. You might be.
Maybe. So I think like obviously you're mentioning I also heard like flat hierarchy, top down, and to be honest, I think as an employee, as somebody who has kind of like grown with the organization, I feel there's safety in structure. So I don't see hierarchy as something bad. I think it is necessary, but it's more of then the words like toxic or, you know, like abuse of power. I think that's when hierarchy goes wrong, right? So how do we still have a structure so that people can feel safe? They know what is required of them, what they perhaps need to do. And then, I don't know, but safety then I think gives me the space to kind of like think about what I need to do.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the success stories I've heard with small organizations, 15, 20 people, even 100 because they can cluster up. But when an organization is 1,000 strong, 2,000 strong, how can you have conversations, right? I mean, now that we're opening the country up and the world is also slowly starting, it's still hard for large organizations. Agree, disagree?
I would think it's harder as you get bigger because you have more diversity in the room, you have more broken telephone as you try to build certain muscle, everybody might catch on in different ways. So it's definitely challenging. So I do agree to some extent that, you know, being smaller, you have a bit more agility, but you know, it comes with another compromise where you have less resources and you're also a lot more put in a position where you kind of have to handle a lot of different things at the same time. So I guess the pressure is different.
Then all the more the need for the boss, the leader, the steward to do something, right? Cynthia, you have a thought on that?
Oh no, I think my opinions are a little bit different.
So please share with us.
So no, I kind of agree with what you said about leadership being very passé. I think we all probably, a lot of us have this idea that, oh, a leader looks a certain way. A leader is the manager, a leader is whoever it is. But because I work in a company which is very young, right? We're all 35, I'm literally the oldest, right? So I feel like increasingly, right, people do start to see leadership as a form of attitude rather than, oh, I'm in that position of leadership. And I think what I've learned with my team is that progressively, I think a leader is somebody who really values his teammates. And value his teammates meaning like, I truly value you as a person, whether you're my manager or you're my -1, I value you and your growth. And therefore, I take up that leadership to be it to give you that feedback or to, like you said, have hard conversations or like whatever you said about, you know, that I care about your growth, which is why I value you and therefore I'm going to give you, I don't know, whatever the feedback that you need to grow.
I have met people who said, Augustine, I don't need you to be nice. I need you to be real. The only way I can grow is you need to tell me. And well, I worked with young people, so I tell them. And I said, I might have to call you on a Sunday because our program or our project is on a Monday. So I mean, and most young people are open about it. Say, I'll do whatever you need. Just give me my Saturdays or something like that. And I thought I would have never reached a situation if we never had that openness from day one, from the day that you even hired a person and you set the scene, so to speak.
In our organization, we do a lot of leadership work, but at the same time, one basic fundamental that we really believe in, it's ultimately about stewarding a sphere of influence that every single person already has. I know we talk about influence in the context of social media influencers, but at the same time, as an individual person, as a friend, as a community member, as a colleague, as a member of the staff team, you do have influence through your actions and words. the way we want to help our teams and help the youth see is that it's about stewarding that. And you do need certain character values, certain mindset, and certain soft skills in order to steward it well. But it's not about title. The actual position is a title. And well, I don't think we can ever run away from titles in the world. So there is that system for that.
So I want to actually take the very question that we heard the voices from and throw it back to all three of you. A good workplace culture is one that?
I think for me, a good workplace culture would be centering on relationships. So I think it's the idea that everyone here has already mentioned. I think that what I heard from the interviewees is just they want to be authentic, they want to be themselves in their workplace, and I think that for me is congruence. Like I want to do relationships the way that I do it in life. I want to do it the same way I do it in workplace. So I think a good workplace culture needs to create conditions where people can feel safe to voice what they want to share, receive feedback, be challenged, but also have that support to then meet the challenges that they are facing in the workplace. So a balance of it, I think.
Support kind of brings back that safe environment as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to just share again what I picked up in the research is even for large organizations, they leave a lot of the responsibility to the supervisors. So there are stories of companies who start the Monday of the week or whatever the day could be for the organization where they gather together in a small group and they say, all right, let's talk. Is that doable? I mean,
Yes,
they actually make time,
Yes,
They actually make time.
Yes.
We do that every Monday.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice to hear.
Yes, I think it is a need because this is like a personal lesson that I've learned is that you can say, like if you're like the top boss, right? And you can say, I have an open door policy, but nobody's gonna come in unless you put out like one-on-ones, you put out that weekly check-in, or you personally reach out to that person to do that extra step. So I think that the conversation that we have about hierarchy, I think the idea of like power and status is something that matters in an organization and people do care of it very much. So I think for any manager or any leader, it is actually such a privilege to receive any form of feedback and you have to actively seek it out.
You listening to you, Sylvia, you're bringing back memories for me. Maybe I was blessed because that concept of open door, actually I had two beautiful, wonderful bosses.
Who modeled, right?
And you went in the door?
And when I knocked on the door, never once did they say, I'm not free, not now. In fact, once one of my bosses said, not now. And then I kind of bent my head and I was like slowly walking out. Okay, come back. It's like, so in the end of the day, we really have to practice, right? We have to make it happen.
For all the leaders who are trying to do that too, I think in encouragement, it takes time. So you do need to practice that, but also display that consistency. And it takes time for people to open up to you. So while you're trying, you might find that the initial efforts don't work and you kind of run the risk of getting very upset and angry. And then, you actually create a greater polarity within whatever was the existing situation. But I think in solidarity, it's tough work, but it's rewarding work. And it does require a lot of heart work and effort for that to really yield some fruit.
But we've been telling our viewers, we're not going to be giving you solutions and tell you, it's a beautiful world out there and everything will be fine. So that second question, let's tackle that and please reverse it in any way you want. What irks me at the workplace, and we've heard all the irks, so to speak. If you could change 3 things at the workplace, what would that be? Or if you feel that these are the 3 things you should work at.
For one, I would love for us to remove some of these labels. I think there are a lot of challenges sometimes when you label like, oh, you don't listen, there's hierarchy. Sometimes I've learned in my own leadership journey that I've been very quick to come in hard on a leader, like you didn't do this. But then now standing in his shoes, I realized, okay, there's a different perspective. So it's good always to not label and get more angry in that process. I think we, as an organization, we're great on thinking about mindsets. Ultimately, we need to bring a growth mindset to the workplace that we have, because the whole environment and the culture takes work, and we need to also give ourselves a bit of space. Sometimes we're so eager to like really achieve and solve all the problems, have a happy workplace, like who doesn't want to, right? But it is something that is ongoing. You will make mistakes along the way as well.
Thank you so much, Ivy. And you remind me again of another interesting phrase that another boss taught me, that sometimes we have to do some of the tough things because I will not be here with you all the time. I mean, it's not that we're going to leave the planet, but what the boss was trying to tell me is one day you will have responsibilities of your own. And I always remember this phrase, we prepared them for tomorrow, but we didn't prepare them for the long haul, for the future. Because we keep thinking, oh, you know, tomorrow the boss will be around, we'll sort this out. So I thought, listening to you, that's for me a key takeaway. And of course, I like your point about removing labels. Sylvia, your closing thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's actually quite similar to Ivy's, right? I think instead of, to add on, right, to removing labels, I think it is allowing a space where everyone can see everyone else's perspectives, right? And I think it takes system and processes to help people understand the KPI of each department or your manager. So I think a good point she mentioned is when, you know, like nobody wants to be the manager because it's like that role that is like unpopular and then you become like nobody's friend when you reach a position. I think perhaps when, you know, when a young organization is younger, you know, there can be system and processes put in place. Like for example, we really try to at least once in 2 months, right? Try to get somebody to do a fun challenge for 48 hours, right? Whereby we do another person's job. And then that's when they realize, oh my God.
You actually do this?
Yes, I do it. And it's been fun so far, right? And it's quite strange because like we have writers doing the photography work and the photographers doing the writing. And then they're like, no, like it is tough.
But they finally realize what work is involved, right? And when the other person has to do whatever it is.
But like for the longest time, I always said, try to understand your teammates. But I realized if there's no system and process to, you know, help them understand, right, that it is just an idealized, you know, concept that nobody's going to be able to execute. You know, so, and then maybe management as well, right? I think sometimes we do try to get them to take a little bit of ownership here and there, you know, as a side project, just so they understand that, hey, it isn't that bad. And, you know, their teammates will also see that, hey, you know, like my manager is not a terrible person because he's actually my friend. Right? After that mini project is coming back as my peer, and, you know, it builds just a space of learning, back to growth mindset,
Well, you remind me again also that basically in the end...
How old are you?
Empower, well, for the record, I'm 62, but anyway, that's a small point. But I mean, listening to you again, I remember when I really had to trust the young people that I was working with, and of course they make mistakes, but we have to allow it to happen. Right? I mean, that's why that word micromanage speaks to me. We cannot keep going on and doing damage control and like, no, it's going to happen. Sometimes we want it to happen because then that individual will realize it, right?
I just have one word, which is rituals. So building on what Ivy mentioned, I think it's about practicing that muscle, right? So it's about practicing the muscle and also building on what Sylvia mentioned. Like, you know, building relationships takes time, and we need to start off with fun things where people can bond, build relationships, get to know each other. Rituals are something that you need to do over time. So if you're only using it to fix problems and to, you know, talk about conflict, and people come together only for that, they're going to hate it.
Yes.
Right? If you have rituals where people are getting together to build relationships, to learn about each other, to slowly begin to realize that it's safe to open up, I can be honest in this space, I can trust my fellow colleagues and maybe my bosses in sharing certain things, then I think that helps in building that workplace culture. It's not going to be very easy. It takes time to practice like a muscle if you want to be, you know, like you want it to be strong. And yeah, I think that's the same for relationships. Nothing is built in a day. It really just takes time. So hopefully everybody finds the time to connect and to build relationships. Yeah.
Deborah Wan, Sylvia Chan, Ivy Tse, thank you so much for your candid opening and sharing. Hint to the organizers, maybe we should invite all three of you back for a part 2 somewhere down the line. But with that, we need to bring this to a close, and please do support the LCCS's work. the Lutheran Community Care Services. And how you can do this is through your own personal giving via the QR code that will appear on your screen. We started this journey, and we would like to say it again. It was never meant to provide you with solutions. It was really for you to hear perspectives. And today we have provided you that platform through the voices that you heard in the videos, and of course, our three charming guests. And with that, we say thank you so much. And we have this tradition at LCCS. This is not the end. Actually, the journey continues. Bye for now.